We'll take a break. When we come back from the break, we're going to be listening to an extended interview, a portion of an extended interview done a few years ago from a gal who left Hillsong Church in Sydney, Australia. And she's since written a book, and the name of her book is People in Glass Houses. And we're going to be listening to her. Her name is Tanya Levin. And we'll be listening to an interview she did a couple of years ago after her book was published, called People in Glass Houses. And the reason we'll be listening to her is because I want you to hear for yourself from somebody who has been involved with Hillsong Church in Sydney, Australia, and has subsequently left, why they left. What was the problem? What were the things that they were concerned about? And in listening to her story, and I don't want to say testimony, because in listening to her interview, it doesn't sound like Tanya has remained in Christianity. I can't tell for sure if she has joined up with a different Christian church or left Christianity altogether. I can't tell. Clearly, her time at Hillsong, she considers it to have been toxic, abusive, and that there are some significant problems there. And I will be passing portions of her interview on to you so that you can hear for yourself from somebody who was involved in Hillsong, who became disillusioned with Hillsong and saw the light and left Hillsong, and hear from them. Hear from her as to why she left and what the problems were. And I think this is significant because her critiques, her problems that she's having with Hillsong sound a lot like the same kind of problems that we hear from people who've left Mars Hill, Mark Driscoll's church, or who have left Perry Noble's church, or who have left Stephen Furtick's church. Same kind of syndrome. People who she refers to them, and funny enough, I use the same term, the walking wounded, those who have been absolutely battered and beaten by abusive, vision-casting pastor types. So in this case, it's Brian Houston. And of course, this isn't accidental. The reason why I wanted to throw this in there is because I think this piece is important for those people who are joining the Fighting for the Faith listening audience as a result of seeing the video podcast regarding Carl Lentz, and so that they can understand there's some deep problems with the Hillsong, and then down, doesn't he? Anyway. Moving along, we've got to finish up here. We've got an update from Hillsong to end out hour number 2, which requires me to do this.
In touch with the ground, I'm on the hunt, I'm after you. Smell like the sound, I'm lost in a cloud, and I'm hungry like the wolf. Straddle the line, discord and rhyme, I'm on the hunt, I'm after you. Mouth is alive, juice is like wine, and I'm hungry like the wolf.
That's right, hungry like the wolf. Yeah, that's our Los Lobos update. So we've got a Los Lobos update from Hillsong, and we are going to be listening to a portion of an interview done a couple of years ago from a gal who spent quite a bit of time at Hillsong in Sydney, Australia. Her name is Tanya Levin, and she ended up writing a book that you can purchase, by the way, at Amazon. The name of the book is People in Glass Houses, People in Glass Houses. And she's going to talk about her time and some of the history at Hillsong and what she considered to be the problems there. See if you can note some of the recurring themes that we talk about here at Fighting for the Faith, despite the fact that this interview took place in August of 2007. Here we go.
And Hillsong was very much geared towards money, recruitment, and fundraising.
That's a cult behavior, by the way. You know, any organization that is geared towards money, recruitment, and fundraising, that's one of the classic signs you're dealing with a cult mentality.
I want to show you a bit of Brian Houston. This is from Australian Story in 2005.
I really have this belief that church should be enjoyed and not endured. Sadly, I think it is possible for church to be a very long hour. I want people to be able to be animated about their worship,
And I love walking into the 6 o'clock service and then bang, getting hit by the presence of God. It's cool. Tell someone next to you it's cool.
You write in the book that even today when you hear Brian's voice, it makes you feel better. How does Brian
It's funny
work for you?
that when you go to Bible college, apparently you learn that when you say, tell the person next to you, it's just a way for when the pastor's lost his thought train. So turn to the person next to you and say, you look great. He's a very powerful speaker. His content is not very heavy, but...
A powerful speaker, lots of image and delivery, no substance is what she's talking about there. If you haven't seen the Fighting for the Faith video blog episode yet, you need to.
He's very charismatic and, he's a voice of my childhood. He's a voice of, leadership in my upbringing. So, and he always sounds so happy and so pleased to be where he is and so proud of you that you're doing this thing with him, that you almost want to be a part of it all over again.
Okay, so that's kind of her talking about, the insider scoop and how it made her feel when she was a part of it, but she's not a part of it anymore. We continue with the interview.
It was 2002, and in fact it was a speech Brian made to the congregation, an important speech, which really started I think it's fair to say, your path to disillusionment. Can you talk us through that?
I went to see Pastor Brian talk about his father having been removed from ministry. And he proceeded to talk about, having to have confronted his father over what he called a serious moral failure. These were allegations.
Now, wait till you hear what the serious moral failure was. So this is going back in the history of Hillsong. Apparently, it was planted by Brian Houston's father, and there was a moral failing on the part of Brian Houston's father, and it was discussed in a way that it wasn't actually the substance of that moral failing really wasn't talked about much at Hillsong. Let me back this up, and I want you to hear exactly what the moral failing of Brian Houston's father was. Here we go.
Having to have confronted his father over what he called a serious moral failure. These were allegations of sexual offences against teenage boys, which was never actually named on the day. So there was a serious moral failure. He'd had to confront his father about it. His father had confessed. The National Executive had then taken away his credentials, investigated and taken away Houston Senior's credentials, and that Brian Houston himself was crushed. And he asked for the congregation to pray for his family, for his wife and his children. And the congregation did. They stood up and they applauded him, and that was the end of that speech.
There was no reference to the people that have been abused or whose lives may be damaged.
Absolutely no reference to the victims. There was no stance taken on child sexual assault or child abuse of any form or care for children. There was no standing up and saying, look, we will not tolerate this in our congregation. And in fact, what it made me wonder was, if this is how they treat these kinds of issues on the most public level that they've got, how are they treating them on smaller, in more private arenas?
Great question. If this is how they're going to handle a serious moral failing like sexually assaulting teenage boys and just kind of not talk about it openly and sweep it under the carpet and it all goes away, what are they doing with less offenses? Great question, Tanya. Great question.
You raise a number of questions about Hillsong Church, and one of those is about prosperity theology, which is probably best summed up in the title of this book by Brian Houston, You Need More Money.
That's right. The name of a book, a popular book written by Brian Houston. The name of the book is You Need More Money. You need more money. Now, keep in mind, Tanya Levin, she grew up in Hillsong. She was part of it. She knew it from the inside out, not from the outside in. So he's going to ask her about this book and the prosperity gospel and what it is that she learned. Listen in.
Can you explain to us what prosperity theology is?
Prosperity theology is the belief, the absolute belief that according to the Bible, according to the verses in the Bible, God wants you to be rich. He wants you to have prosperity in every area of your life, particularly your finances. And that to not be that way is actually to be disobedient to the Word of God.
Why would God want you to be rich? What does that achieve?
You know, if the Christians can have all the wealth, then they can redistribute it as they wish to, you know, to the areas of poverty that they want to distribute it to, the areas of need that they see fit.
Well, Hillsong has a strong record of distributing to charity. This is what Brian Houston said on Australian Story about where some of their money goes.
There's various ways that we are able to fund the various projects and community programs that we're involved in, and they include everything from private enterprise to the church's own resources to members of the congregation to government grants. 60% of the total income goes towards helping people directly.
From your viewpoint, is that the whole picture?
It's very abstract. 60% of their money goes towards helping people directly. That could mean any number of things.
Do you suspect that under closer scrutiny that there is something questionable about the way Hillsong operates?
I can't argue that there's anything questionable. What I could argue that is questionable is the lack of transparency. So, you know, as much as they might say their books are open, everybody that I've interviewed who has asked to have a look at the books is told that they've got a bad attitude or they've got doubts.
Uh-huh. Yeah, this sounds familiar to the Stephen Furtick story. You know, they claim to be transparent, but yet no one's been able to actually see the books. Huh, weird.
So you're suggesting that Hillsong is primarily set up for recruitment
And
and
fundraising.
fundraising for itself, which would imply the faith that is apparently at its core is not necessarily a genuine faith. Is this more a question of you having lost your faith rather than the church having lost its?
It took a very long time to take my faith away from me. It was really the last thing I wanted to do, was to admit that all of this stuff was true. My opinions have changed again since I've been researching, and I've met so many people negatively affected by churches like this that it just added up to be, you know, too many people with the same kinds of stories.
You referred to them as the walking wounded. Why are they wounded?
I found a very strong pattern in what happens when people show resistance. So everything's happy and everything's fine when you don't show any kind of resistance. If you show resistance to the pastors, the leadership, the program, the teaching, you're dealt with very severely.
What does severely mean?
Well, you know, in cases there are people who have been told that they're demonic. And generally what has happened is that once people are showing enough resistance, that is going to need to be quelled immediately. So they're often ostracised, and other congregants are told not to have anything to do with them because they've got doubts, you know. They're not for us, they must be against us. It's a very fundamentalist, polarised point of view.
Okay. When you told Brian and Bobby that you wanted to write this book, because you did, what happened? What was the response?
So I got a response from the general manager of Hillsong, who said that I had caused significant disruption, that I was never to go on Hillsong premises again, and that, no, they won't be helping me with the book.
There you go. Information from a former insider at Hillsong. Sounds like the same stuff that we hear from Perry Noble, Stephen Furtick, Rick Warren, and others. Something seriously wrong in the Christian church with these celebrity pastors, don't you think? All right, we're up on our second break. If you'd like to email me regarding anything you've heard on this edition or any previous editions of Fighting for the Faith, you could do so. My email address is talkback@fightingforthefaith.com, or subscribe on Facebook, facebook.com/Pirate Christian. Follow me on Twitter, my name there, @Pirate Christian. Quick break. When we come back, a sermon review from Christine Kane, a pastrix from Hillsong, preaching at lifechurch.tv. Don't want to miss it. We'll be right back.